What's up, guys? It's Joel of Puncher's Paintball. Today we are going over how to fill a compressed air tank. If you guys like this video, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can bring you all the newest content as well as instructional videos. We'll see you guys after the intro. Alright guys, so here we are, we're in our store, and today we have a 80 cubic inch 4500 psi tank with a Haymaker reg. So there are some important things, and as you can see, the psi is set at 0 currently. So there's a few things that you're going to want to be cognizant of if you're filling your compressed air tank for the first time. So first thing that you want to be aware of is the gauge at 0 psi. It should always be at 0 psi. If it's not, that's a good indication that something's wrong with the gauge or that there's already pressure in the tank, and you're going to want to check it before you fill it. A few things to identify on the regulator is you're going to have 2 burst discs. It's going to be a 7.5K burst disc for 4500 psi tanks, and then you also have a 1.8K burst disc. That's for every single paintball tank that is compressed air out there. It's going to have a 1.8K. And basically these burst discs blow in the event that, for safety reasons, the 1.8 is set so that the gun that you're using can never see over 1800 psi worth of pressure coming out of the regulator. That means your piston is failing within the tank. And then the 7.5 is to not allow you to fill past 7500 psi for a 4500 bottle, or for a 3000 psi tank if you're using an aluminum tank, or maybe an older carbon fiber tank that's still 3000 psi. Those are ranked at 5K, and that's the same concept so that you're not overfilling your tank way past what it's rated at.
All right, Joel, I got a question for you.
All right, what's up?
How do you tell the difference between a CO2 tank and a compressed air tank?
So that's a great question. So something that you're going to be cognizant of is that a CO2 tank is going to have what's called a pen valve. So as you can see here, this isn't a full-size regulator like the compressed air tank. So you do have that. Even on your basic 48 cubic inch, your beginner tank, 3000 psi, you're going to have a gauge. So as you can see, this has some air in it. You're going to have a fill nipple, and then you're going to have both of those burst discs. CO2 tank is not going to have those features, and you never want to try and either, have a CO2 tank that takes compressed air or vice versa, because we actually do get asked that a lot as well. So the other thing too is CO2 tank is going to say CO2 somewhere on there. And same thing with carbon fiber tank. You're always looking for cubic inch as well as a PSI rating when it comes to compressed air. With this, it's just volume basically.
Yeah. So CO2 is actually measured rather than based off the pressure. It's measured in weight.
Correct.
Versus
because CO2 liquidifies with a certain amount of pressure, turns into liquid. So with that said, if you've got your tank, you're at the field, a lot of times you'll self-fill. So it's not always going to be somebody filling it for you. So we're going to take a step back to our compressed air unit in the back and show you guys exactly what you need to know. Alright guys, so we're back here in our back portion of our store. As you can see here, we actually have our compressor. Every field is going to have one of these. Most likely you're not actually going to see it. But needless to say, it's going to be there somewhere because it's going to fill your storage tanks. Most likely, once again, you're probably not going to see the storage tank, but what you're going to see most likely is this fill station. Now, certain fields are going to have a 3000 psi fill station as well as a 4500 psi fill station. We here at our store, this is actually at 5000 psi for our compressor. But that's because we know the difference between 3000 psi and 4500 psi. If you're not familiar with that, you're going to want to ask your field, hey, does this fill all the way to 4500 psi? If you have a 3000 psi tank, you're going to want to be cognizant not to overfill it all the way to that 4500 psi. So with that said, every compressed air tank is going to have this fill nipple here. And basically all it is inside there is a little piston. And when you apply pressure to it, it sets back and allows access to the actual storage area of the bottle. So every field is going to have this extension right here. This is an 8mm high pressure hose, and then at the end of this is your quick adapter. So with the quick adapter, you're going to want to pull this back and put it all the way on. Now, as you can see there, it locks into place, and there's no questions, if and or buts, about whether or not it's actually on, because you can pull it and it's not going to come off. Now, with that said, this is what happens if you don't fully attach. Either that, or as Keegan takes a step back, it's because this can go flying. So you're going to want to be very, very careful of making sure that this is on all the way. So as you can see there, it sits flush with the all the way back onto the fill nipple.
The other thing that I've seen people do is they'll get it on all the way, but this sometimes won't latch over the O-ring that's in there.
That's a very good point.
And so you have to push it forward, and so if it's just back like that, then it's going to go flying off, and you're not going to have a good time.
Yep. Okay, so now with that said, we've got it hooked up, and it is now safe to fill. So with this type of fill station, you're either going to have this knob button here, or you're actually going to have a push button, one or the other, but it's the same concept. With this, you can apply a certain amount of pressure. You're always going to want to fill the tank slowly, because if you fill it very quickly, the tank can get very warm. It's not necessarily a safety risk, but some people feel uncomfortable filling fast. It's always better to fill your tank slow. And on top of that, what's called a hot fill is basically the concept that you fill it hot, and as it cools down, you lose a certain amount of pressure. So the slower that you fill the tank and the more patient you are with the tank, the more pressure you're going to end up with not losing, because there's no temperature changes as the tank cools down. So with that said, I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure here, and as you can hear, it kind of clicked there. And as you can see with the gauge, it's starting to fill up. And then as it starts to gain more and more pressure, and I'm getting closer to that final PSI rating that I'm at, I can actually feel the tank starting to get a little warm. And I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure to fill it a little bit quicker. Alright, and you guys can hear that. The air is gone, even though I haven't fully opened. That means the air has reached equilibrium. You also heard that it dumped air there. So what that did was it was a valve release that allowed the air pressure inside this tank, or inside this hose that's connected to your actual tank. It dumped that air. This is still under pressure, but this is not. So fill station wise, if you don't hear that air dump, chances are you're not going to be able to pull this off. So very important concept. The other thing too is, say that air, or say you release this and air is just dumping out and dumping out, chances are your fill nipple is bad and it needs to be replaced. Another thing that can happen is if you have a bad burst disc, either the 1.8 or 7.5 or the 5K burst disc has been blown, you're going to dump air as you're filling the tank, and you've got it all hooked up. It's going to be dumping air out of one of these burst discs. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. Alright guys, so there you have it. That is how to fill your compressed air tank. As you can see, we're at a full fill here now. Happy customer, because I'm going to go shoot this bad boy out this weekend. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. It hopefully answered some of your questions regarding any type of troubleshooting issues with the burst disc, the fill nipple, and all that stuff. And I really hope that you guys enjoy this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and we will see you guys at the next one.